starting off at this easy pawn, I headed right to the game section where I was checking out the Wii games, and honestly they had a bunch, but nothing I had to have. Right next to that, they had a bunch of Xbox 360 games, which have been going up in price, so I'm always checking these out. Then they had some PlayStation 4 and even a PlayStation 5 game, which is kind of shocking on the shelf. Then I headed over and checked out the game console section, and honestly, there wasn't anything special here. It was everything that you would normally see: PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Switches, and stuff like that. So I got out of there and headed into this next thrift store where I ended up having a pretty big Xbox One selection and Xbox One consoles, but nothing there that was even remotely interesting. They had a ton of Switch consoles, but only one Switch game, and again, a bunch of PlayStation 4 games here, even some PlayStation 4 Pro consoles here, and one controller and one PS5 game, but nothing else. So I checked out up at the front, and I ended up seeing some Switch joycons, and I ended up grabbing them, which was interesting. Because honestly, I figured I wouldn't really find anything here. However, these are some pretty busted Switch joycons, and they couldn't test them, or they weren't going to sell them with a unit. So I ended up getting 5 joycons for $10 each. So I spent $50 on all these joycons. I think for the most part they should work. The sticks obviously need to be replaced, but I think I can manage that, and maybe I'll clean them up and see if I can get new shells. But that's going to be a video for the future, so make sure you're subscribed because this is going to happen soon. But I'm kind of shocked that they did $10. I kind of wondered if I should have done less, but for $10 each, I figured I'd pick these up. But let's go ahead and continue on and see what else we can find at pawn shops. Then I headed into this Cash America pawn shop where they actually had a pretty decent section of consoles here. But honestly, it was basically a bunch of beat up Switches, a Nintendo DS that was way overpriced. They wanted like $100 for it. So I didn't really check out too much there. Then I headed over to the game section, which has now changed and is behind the counter, which is kind of a bummer, but there wasn't really anything there. So I got out of there and went into this pawn shop that had a ton of video games. I mean, there was a huge section right here, and then they had a bunch of NES games here on the counter, as well as that Nintendo 64 that wasn't for sale, unfortunately. But they also ended up having a bunch of Super Nintendo games here, as well as a few Nintendo 64 games, and quite a bit of stuff that I ended up grabbing a few things here. And while I was doing that, I asked if they had anything else. He brought out this Lenovo Legion Go, which is pretty interesting, as well as that Steam Deck and this Game Boy Color in the teal colorway, which I ended up picking up. There's a ton of stuff here. I paid $100 for everything here, starting off with that teal Game Boy Color. Obviously, this thing is in pretty good shape. I tested it. It works. It does have a clear battery pack to it, but that's okay. I don't think I have a teal one in my collection, so that's going to stay in the collection for sure. He wanted $50 for it, so I bought a bunch of stuff, so I figured I'd grab that as well. I ended up buying 2 Super Nintendo games. I got Mortal Kombat 3 as well as Super Mario World. Both of these are absolutely cool and a ton of fun to play, so I'm glad that I got those. Then I got 2 Nintendo 64 games that I don't have in my collection at all, which means I'm going to pick them up. International Superstar Stalker. He wanted $12, but I think it was cheaper than that. Then Asteroids Hyper 64 as well. Both of these, like I said, I don't have in the 64 game collection, so I'm going to have to add them. As well as I ended up finding a copy of Magic Darts. Yeah, he wanted $7 for this, but I think after all the actual prices, this was like $3 or $4, so I'm not complaining there. And then I ended up getting my new obsession, which is Game Boy Advance games, especially like the ones that you've never played before or that are like $5 or less, because these are some ridiculous ones. I ended up picking up Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, Lilo and Stitch, Wild Thornberries, and SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, which I'm interested to see how this compares to the actual like PS2 and GameCube game. But I feel like all of this stuff for $100, I mean, you can't beat this. You can't beat this because this is worth like $60. Then the Super Nintendo games are probably $30, and then this is probably like $125 to $150 in value, so picking this up is definitely worth it. But this isn't the only stuff we've got to go, so let's keep hunting at pawn shops. So I made my way into this Easy Pawn here. I don't go to this one very often, but they ended up having quite a bit of games from Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Xbox 360, and maybe a few other here and there. They had a ton of Switch consoles on the bottom, as well as I ended up walking to the counter to check out the consoles over there. But honestly, there wasn't anything worth picking up here, so I got out of there pretty quickly and went to this other Easy Pawn store, which actually, again, had a ton of video games here in this glass case. I checked it out. There was some controllers, some Xbox One, even some Wii games here. And at the top, they ended up having a few PS5 controllers, which I ended up grabbing, even though they were as is. They were only $15, and I think we could probably figure these out by testing them. And one last ditch effort, I headed into the Cash America pawn one more time since I was already in the area, and I checked out the glass case, and right again, I saw the blue PlayStation 5 controller. I know we just picked up one, but for only $25, this one was as is too, which is kind of interesting. The game selection and the consoles were pretty meh, but I also ended up finding Pokemon Diamond, Brilliant Diamond for the Switch, which is totally awesome because that means we picked up 3 PlayStation 5 controllers and then Pokemon Brilliant Diamond for the Switch. They wanted $30 for it. I tried to talk them down, but they had just put it out, so I paid $30 for this. I know that's about what it's going for, but I want to play this, so it's definitely well worth picking up. And then the 2 white PS5 controllers, I plugged them in to see if at least they would turn on, and it looks like they're not powering up, so we'll have to check that out. And then the blue one, I was able to turn it on and then pair it to my PlayStation 5. I haven't done anything with any of these yet because, again, I think we're going to save these and those Switch controllers for another video, but I feel like for $15 each and then $25 for this was actually a pretty good pickup. Which all in all left us with 8 controllers to repair, which I'll talk about in a future video. Then we got 2 Super Nintendo games, an NES game, 2, again, Nintendo 64 games that I don't have in my collection, a Switch game, 4 Game Boy Advance games, and then the Game Boy. Honestly, here is a ton of awesome stuff, and it goes to show that pawn shops still have stuff today, and you can find deals and games that are worth picking up. So go out, hit your pawn shops, and see if you can haggle with them if they'll allow you to, and find some good deals, because I feel like all of this right here shows that if you go consistently enough, you'll be able to find stuff. Now, I know the controllers are probably a little different if you don't know how to repair stuff, but I think we'll at least get 2, if not all 3 of those PS5 controllers working, and then I should get all of those Switch controllers working, so that's definitely worth picking up, and all these games are going to go right into the game collection. Even that Game Boy for the Game Boy Color, the teal one, is going to stay, so I'm definitely stoked upon that. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here and clean all this stuff up, so check that video out if you haven't already. But what do you think? Was all of this work going into pawn shops to try to get some good deals? Should I have passed on anything? Would you have picked up something that I maybe didn't pick up in the video? Let me know and comment down below. But I'm getting out of here, so check out that video out if you haven't already.